morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We have a city perspective here this morning, and certainly a personality. First thing we want to do this morning, we're going to make our final call to a nationwide personality. In fact, he's probably become maybe worldwide if he ever gets to Guinness Book of Records. Good morning, Rashid Huda, the gentleman who just completed his walk last week, 10 days or so ago, from Chicago, Illinois, Jackson Boulevard in Michigan, all the way to Santa Monica. And are you tired, Rashid?
I'm sorry?
Are you tired, sir?
Am I tired? No. Absolutely not.
Well, you're sleeping in your own bed. Don't have to find a place to sleep.
Yes, I am.
You don't have to stop at a convenience store and pick up a handful of raisins and nuts. So tell us about how many miles did you walk, sir?
Roughly about 2,800 miles is what it ended up being. The Route 66 itself is 2,448 miles. 2,448 miles. So, but between going into town to get things and finding camping spots out of the way and so on and so forth, added a few more miles. Most of those were prior to the half point when I was walking through towns every day, a different town, and going into town, meeting people and stuff. The latter half of it was mostly wilderness, so there was no places to go, so I walked less in the latter half than I did in the first half.
But you saw scenery that the guy running down up in I-55 or 44 or whatever will never have a chance to see. You saw some magnificent countryside, didn't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's and, the interesting thing about the scenery is what I feel is when we open our eyes, we can see it even wherever we are. I remember one day, particularly, I made a post because as I was leaving the truck stop, somebody told me, well, have fun because there ain't nothing to see out there. And I had about 20 pictures that I posted that day saying, I was glad to see a whole lot of nothing today.
Yeah, you had some interesting posts on Facebook, and it was interesting to watch that a lot of people followed you. You've made a lot of friends, my young man.
Yes, sir, I did. About 500 new friends on Facebook alone, and a lot of them were face-to-face friends that I came across that started following me or becoming friends on Facebook. So I am blessed. As one of the gentlemen, Michael Garrett, once told me, there are no strangers, only friends you haven't met yet.
Well, that's a good saying. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Tell me, sir, how did I happen to run into, well, just a matter of timing, but how did you happen to be in a local IGA store, which was way in the heck and gone off of, well, yeah, too far off of City 66, I guess. Did you just happen to find that IGA store, or were you directed there?
I was actually directed there. I went down to the newspaper office to see if they would be interested in doing a story about my walk. Pontiac, Illinois had done one earlier in the week, and I thought, well, this would be a good opportunity, so I went down to the newspaper place, and the lady said that since there was at that time there was a county fair going on in town, and everybody was at the county fair. There was no reporters in town in the office.
we're laughing. So, we're laughing here locally. That newspaper, sir, is owned by Gannett. I believe it's Gannett, isn't it? But anyway, the paper's not even published here. It's printed, I think, in Peoria. I'm not certain about that. And we kind of have a scouting office here now, unfortunately, so they don't have much in the way of able to cover local people because they don't have the people there. So anyway, I was glad that I had been there.
I asked him if there were a place close by where I can go get something to eat, because Google was telling me everything was out of town, about 2 hours walk away from where I was, and I was getting hungry. And the options she gave me was a couple of taverns and IGA, and I'm not a big tavern fan, so I said, hey, IGA, green stamps, I remember them. I haven't seen one of those in ages.
You're not as young as they say, are you?
No, I'm not.
Now, do you remember?
That's how I ended up in IGA.
Yeah, do you remember what I told you about that bench you sat on?
Yes, sir. I still have a picture of that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, just always remember that little fella sitting there is now 93 years old. So, well, now, before we quit this morning, book plans. Are you able to be serious about that? You've kept an interesting journal, and I hope that you'll be able to put that in publication form.
Yes, that is a plan. I have contacted Brad Bushnell, and we are kind of in touch and working. He's given me some great advice on how to go about putting all the information that I have and notes that I've taken over the past 6 months or so. And so, yes, that is something that I'm definitely working on. And the other thing that I'm working on is creating a website where I will be uploading all of my photos, and another website where I would create information about people who may be thinking about walking the Route 66, because there's not a whole lot of information about that for people who want to walk. There's some for people who want to do bikes and drive the Route 66, but people interested in walking, there's not a whole lot, so I would be setting up another website for that purpose.
Well, that'll be an advantage for people who have that desire. Judy was kind of picked up on that. I don't know whether she's going to make plans on that or not, but she just picked up on that just now. But Rashid, I'm going to stay in touch with you, young man. I'm glad that you and Brad Bushnell happens to be one of my very favorite, and Gene's too, one of a young man. As a matter of fact, we kept Brad while his mother went to the hospital to have his brother Tim. So that's how far we go back. And I've been delighted with his success, and so he'll steer you in the right direction. Wish you Godspeed in the future, and you and I'll stay in touch, sir.
Yes, sir. And one last thing that I wanted to mention was the stroller that I have donated that to the museum in California, and I have given them instructions that when Lincoln sets up their Route 66 museum, which I read about, that you guys are in the process of starting a Route 66, and if you are interested in, they will be more than happy to loan that stuff for you to display at your museum over there.
Well, that'd be pretty neat if and when that happens, sir. Rashid Huda, world traveler, but more specifically, Central United States traveler. We sure appreciate your sharing your time with us. We wish you well, and as I say, I'll stay in touch with you, my friend.
Thank you, sir, and it was a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to be of service. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much, sir.
Bye-bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of a route for a young man, 64 years old, who decided he wanted to walk 66 just because he wanted to do it. And he picked up a favorite charity along the line of a firm in a place in Texas that caters to underprivileged children and kids who need a little extra boost. So God love him. Good for him. Let's get down to serious business. Why don't you introduce our guest, my dear?
I'd like to do that.
I have to defer to you. She owns half the show, Clay.
Well, just a small part. Small half. Clay Johnson is the city manager, and he's here with us today. If you have any questions about city management, especially the city of Lincoln, you can give us a call at 648-5510. Clay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've got several things going on here in Lincoln, America, haven't you?
We forgot one thing, Judith Kay.
What's that?
We forgot the kudos this morning.
Oh, well, you just do that
that's my responsibility. Therefore, I'll have have to go put the chair in the corner and face the corner for a while. We were talking about kudos, and Judith came up with the idea that maybe we ought to offer the group at Lincoln College and the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce a big kudo for putting together the forum for our mayoral candidates tonight at 7 o'clock at the Lincoln College Johnson Center for the Performing Arts. This is an opportunity, voters, for you to take a look at your candidates. If you have a question, you will be given a chance to submit a question in writing to the committee out there, and every question will be answered by all 4 candidates, as we understand it, which is the correct way to handle that. So this is a good time to find out who's running for mayor of your city. Now we have the city administrator. And Judith, let's go ahead with our questions for Clay.
You know, Clay, they've talked for a long time about city garage. They've also talked about moving the fire department. Now the police are moving down to Jefferson School. And when is that supposed to come to fruition?
We're in the design phase of that particular project, the police department, right now. FGM Architects is working with the staff and elected officials to come up with a floor plan and design and all those particulars about Jefferson School. And what you'll see, I think, will be still very similar to the facade and front that Jefferson School currently is. You know, the footprint really isn't changing all that much.
No.
And what's nice about the building itself is it's a masonry block building. It's relatively secure, and that's going to be to, you know, our police department's advantage because it's a very structurally sound building, a very safe building.
Well, it has to be for children.
Yeah.
Good enough for the kids, good enough for the police.
Right.
I want to cover something, Clay. I really feel very strongly that this needs to be covered. We've heard naysayers. Well, what do we do? We've got a police department.
Sure.
If they only step inside there, if nothing but to take a look around and see how really terribly crowded it is.
Yes.
And to have those facilities, it's very difficult for them to do their job.
Yes.
This is an opportunity, a golden opportunity for our police department to be under their own out there in a facility that would sit there probably for a long time unused.
Right.
So I think this is a win-win situation.
Right. If you walk over to the 911 complex at 911 Beacon Street, where the police department's currently housed.
Is that really their address?
Yes, that is their address.
How clever you Americans.
And some of, if I remember right, many of the telephone phones over there end in 911. It's just a different 6-911, 3-911, 4-911. But anyway, I think the police department operates in somewhere around 900 to 1,200 square feet, and you know that's all the sworn officers, the civilian personnel, and administration, investigations, patrol, all are in that little area, and that makes it
really.
It is,
minuscule.
And if you think about all of the demands that are on a modern day police department, it's difficult for them to do everything which they're required to do, and even some of the things that we do day to day as, you know, people who go to work. Eat your lunch. They eat their lunch in the same place where they clean their guns. There's not really adequate place for evidence processing. There's not a good way to keep the efficiencies of the department going just because of the cramped space. You know, storage, there's so much storage that we have to have because of the evidence that's collected, and if there's large items, cars, bicycles, motorcycles, it's difficult to find places for them. So you know, we're kind of keeping all those things in mind when designing this new building. And to finish your earlier question, it appears that later March, early spring, we'll likely be looking for bids to go out for general contractors to look at and put a pen to paper on and see what the numbers come back at. And it's probably a 6 to 8 month construction process. So maybe in 2018 we'll be talking about moving finally over into a new police department.
You know, we've kind of gotten into the habit, if you will, of hiring somebody from out of town
Sure.
to do a study
Sure.
before we do anything. Now, I suppose that I'm living in the past, and we didn't used to have to do that all the time. Now, Chief Adams is a smart cookie.
Oh, yeah,
and he's a nice man too, huh,
You
Bill?
betcha, you betcha.
Yeah. And so he ought to know what he needs.
And I believe he does. Well, there's no question that he knows what he needs. And the reason that groups are brought in, FGM was specifically brought in early on in the process to give us an evaluation of what we are currently doing, how we are currently operating, and what does that translate into in terms of a modern-day police facility. What kind of space needs are out there? And the reason FGM was selected in the very beginning is that they specialize in building police stations and fire stations. That's their bread and butter. And it's easy for someone to say, yes, I need that. I need to have a new police station. And what these guys do is separate the needs from the wants, and to verify, you know, I'd like to have a 36,000 square foot building. Well, no, that's not what you need. You only need 13,000 square feet or something along those lines. So it takes what's very conceptual and things that are subjective and argumentative and put it in a concrete form so that the decision makers, the council and the mayor, can decide, yes, this is what we need, or no, it's not, and give them a direction going forward.
I'd like to point something out, Clay, if I may. 648-5510. Our guest this morning was Clay Johnson, our city administrator. And the reason I mentioned that in particular is that, you know, we have always, anywhere you go, you're going to have naysayers. But and we've had people say, "Oh my God, what do we need? What are we paying as city administrator? We got a mayor."
Right.
Well, folks, this is not Mayberry. You just mentioned something that's very specific to my thoughts, and that is, no mayor has the time to do the research and follow up, and all of the time investment that the city administrator does on hundreds of things, let alone we're talking about specifically now our new police department out there on 5th Street. So I think we ought to address that. You know, what is our budget? How much money do you handle in a year's time, young man?
The operating budget is around $13 million.
Okay.
We have an appropriations budget, which is kind of a different story of $25 million, and that just establishes a shell, if you will, of what can be spent. But operating wise, it's about $13 million.
Well, I submit there's no mayor anywhere, particularly right here, who has the expertise to spend that money wisely or allocate it wisely. There's just innumerable things. I noticed your desk when I went up to see you. It was piled pretty high. And that's not because you're not a good administrator. You just got a big workload. And I think that needs to be addressed because a lot of people, naysayers, and they're always going to have them. Well, we got a mayor. We don't need that. In today's times, I'd hate for Lincoln to try to get along without an administrator, whether it's Clay Johnson or Sally Smith.
Sure. And I understand that the position is new, and there's a lack of understanding about, you know, what people in this position do. And I welcome anybody who has questions about city management or the administrator's position or what specifically happens in Lincoln to come talk to us. I think that having a conversation can only benefit both parties. Like I said, I understand that there's a learning curve to be had, but there's one thing to be known is that the council manager form of government, which is similar to what we have here, is the most common form of government in the United States. So while this position is new to Lincoln, it is not new to the remainder of Illinois, to the remainder of the United States. So the reason that this is hopefully beneficial to the community is to kind of enact those things that the council and the mayor set forward. They put the direction forward and pass it on down to myself and the department heads to carry out. And we try to do that in the most efficient way possible. Of course, we're going to have disagreements about how things get done. That's just the nature of
that
government.
Happens in my house every day.
That's true. That just happens in
my house,
in local government. Yeah, you can rule the roost.
To pass rules.
But we try to do it the best way possible, and there is a reason to the means. There is a reason behind what we do, and we try to do the best we can.
You know, we're going to try to do the best we can right now to accommodate some sponsors, and if we don't have them, we don't have Viewpoint. so go right ahead, Mr. Ash. And right back live in the studios here at WLCN. The program is Viewpoint, of course, on each Wednesday morning, 8:15 to 9 o'clock. Our guest this morning is our city administrator, Mr. Clay Johnson. Clay, one of the things we would like to try to cover this morning is our new Streets and Alleys garage out there on Lemon Street. It's about ready. There have been a few problems come up here, and you can build an outhouse, you're going to have a few problems, so that's not a big deal. How's that coming along? All right?
It's moving along quite well. I'd say we're probably 75% done, 80% done. It's looking like end of March, mid-March, we'll be complete with construction and starting to move equipment and all the tools and people over to the new building. It's coming together quite well.
We ought to address the question, why do we have to do that?
Well, that's a good question. The ground that the current city garage sits on is a legacy project of ComEd and NICOR, and there used to be some old coal firing furnaces there, and back in the early 1900s, and all of that coal and all that byproduct went into the ground and contaminated the ground. And when that was discovered, it became the responsibility of the utilities, ComEd and NICOR, to come in and remediate that ground for what was polluted there. So we are being paid to move to this new facility, and once we are gone, the old building will be demolished, and they'll begin to do the remediation process on that property. When they get completed, the finished ground will be turned back over to us.
Bottom line is significant costs for the new facility are being taken care of by ComEd and NICOR.
Yeah, but the amount that ComEd and NICOR are providing is a little over $4 million.
That ought to build you a pretty nice garage.
Well, that's the hope. And the thing is that when designing this facility, we understand that these are once-in-a-generation type builds. You're not going to build a street facility every 5 years, every 10 years.
No.
So we tried to keep the future in mind when doing this, making sure there's adequate space for growth and adequate space for anything that we may incur over the next few decades. So we're proud of how it's coming together, and we think it's going to be a real benefit to the department.
And then they will go in and remedy the ground for God knows what reason. EPA.
Let the EPA decide that, yes.
And then what will likely happen with the end result of that particular property?
That's probably up for debate. The council will have to make a decision at some point as to what to put there. I doubt that the land will be... it's an odd-shaped property.
Yes,
I don't know that it'll ever be a commercially type used facility. It could be a nice little green space for some use down the line.
Or maybe storage space for all that black fencing that the railroad's putting down the right away.
They sure have a bunch of it, that's for sure.
Oh, my goodness gracious. I don't get onto that. My goodness gracious. I don't understand that at all. So, for the most part, this nice new facility, which obviously is needed anyway, they were crowded out there.
Yes, they were.
Nobody ever goes in there. But
You'll be surprised. There's a handful.
Well, then those that went in there realized it pretty well crowded up.
Yes.
So anyway, that will be taken care of. Now let's go to the depot, sir. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen to the depot. I sure hope they're able to keep it in there, not change a thing architecturally, and it appears that's the plan right now.
Right. The state selected a engineer and architect for all of the depot restorations on the corridor. So Dwight, Pontiac, ourselves, Normal, Springfield, Carpentersville, Alton. I think that's the majority of them.
Did that follow then with a monetary contribution or just?
Yes. So the state is funneling federal funds to each of these builds, including Lincoln, and the local community does have a match. But in Lincoln's particular case, because there was a site there, because that there was a working depot there had to be some nod given to the historic look of that building. So they had to go in front of the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency to build the depot in a architectural style similar to that of the 1911 depot. So that's why you see the same footprint. When you walk in, you'll see very much the same layout of the building. The terrazzo floors that were there will be restored. And all of those things in which you see have to be signed off by the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency.
Like the woodwork, for instance?
Yes, it has to. It has to be repaired and replaced in places where possible. We just talked about at the council last week, I believe, or maybe 2 weeks ago, that the soffit, the exterior soffit, is beadboard that had been there for ages. And the problem with that beadboard is that over time it has kind of warped and gotten beaten up, and the original idea was repair and replace. And the contractor that's working there took down the soffit and tried to match it up in a corner. And because of the different widths and because of probably different times in which the soffit had been repaired and replaced beforehand, the beadboard didn't match up in the corner, and it was extremely difficult for them to make that work. So there had to be an appeal made to the Historic Preservation Agency to say, this isn't going to work, and it's going to be time intensive, it's going to be labor intensive, and they were willing to say, replace in kind. So they're going to use a new soffit board in those particular, in the exterior soffit. So, you know, everything that you see has to kind of get a nod from Historic Preservation with the depot.
Are you saving my favorite bench?
Your favorite bench?
Yes. In the old days, everybody says old days. When I was a kid, I used to meet the morning train from Bloomington, take the pantograph off about 5, and we'd take the papers in and fold them on the benches there, put them in our bag, and away we go on our various routes.
Right.
So I said, "Did you save my waiting seat?"
You point to the seat. We'll make sure we grab it and we can give it to you as a historic relic. How about that?
There you go.
And when you're looking at the building, you know, there's the larger structure to the south, and then there's the breezeway, and then the building to the north, the small square-shaped building. That square-shaped building, the smaller building, will be the new waiting station. So
that's the old Railway Express part on the north end.
Right.
Yes.
That will be where people come and wait for the train. There'll be bathroom facilities in there and benches, and you can sit indoors comfortably and wait for the train.
You realize how many chickens we just shipped out of that facility?
I'm sure the number is quite big.
Oh, it's huge. We had a place called Seeb's Hatchery, and they shipped chicks, little babies.
Okay, yeah.
By the hundreds of thousands. God knows what the mortality rate was by the time they got where they were going. But that was a big deal.
Sure.
I see Earl Boots and Cheese Amberg pulling those railway express wagons up alongside those railway cars and loading those chicks on the way they went. So those that will be the public waiting area for the trains.
That's correct.
Now, what about the area that was erected that was the sleeping quarters for a gentleman for many years. That's new. That's not indigenous to the territory. Will that come down?
The Amtrak building that's to the far south, that'll go away.
It will.
Yes,
so
that'll be taken away.
So we have the original site.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at.
Exactly.
Now,
that's exactly right. And the grounds themselves will be restored and repaired, and I think that'll be a tremendous look for the downtown and for the depot area, because there'll be nice landscaping and a nice little looped drive so that people can drop people off for the train, and really be accommodating to the train traffic and the people who utilize the train.
Is there a timetable on that? What do you expect?
We have to have the project done by June 30th.
Of this year?
Of this year. We think that we can do it. It's tight, but we can do it. And the reason that it has to be June 30th is that federal funding ends on June 30th of 2017. So any of the money that we are incurring is being reimbursed by the state at about a 95% clip. So we are making sure that we get it done, because if we go past that date, it's likely that we will be holding the bag for any expenses incurred after that.
My question was going to be, so what happens if you're not done by June 30th? But now that's a real incentive, isn't it?
It is. And
cut off your water.
We have bi-weekly, every other week, progress meetings with the contractor and with the state of Illinois to make sure everything is moving along successfully, and if there's any type of obstacles or impediments we think that are going to delay construction, we try to work those through as best we can.
How about the Pulaski Street side of the square? It was redesigned. Does it seem that it's fulfilling the purpose for which the redesigning was done?
Well, I think that's a question of depends on who you ask.
Whose ox got gored?
Right. I think there's a lot of that. I think that it is an aesthetic improvement to the downtown. I think that the original intent of that block was to slow traffic that go through that area to make it safer for pedestrians and for people to look around and actually see what's going on in the downtown there, and it's made that walkway safer for pedestrians and handicap access alike. In fact, we had a group of individuals from Springfield, from the Department of Justice, from some ADA advocacy groups come and actually tour it, and they were just floored at how well this seemed to accommodate ADA accessibility, and that was a nice thing to hear. So. Again, I think it's dependent upon who you ask, but I think that the intent that was brought forward was achieved with that streetscape design.
The biggest glaring problem we have is in our infrastructure is obviously our streets.
Sure.
And we're not talking about fixing this in a couple of years.
Right.
This is a huge project.
Right.
What thought has been given, and that's one of the questions that some people certainly are going to ask our candidates tonight, long-range planning, because you just can't, the problems we have in our streets cannot be remedied in 2 years.
Right.
This is a long-term. So do you have a comment about that?
Absolutely. The city operated before my arrival here on a 5-year road improvement plan, and they tried to stick to it to the best of their ability, but sometimes funding just wasn't there to accomplish everything that was within that plan.
We're talking big money. It
is. And let's not mistake that roads are a problem everywhere. They're constantly the thing that gets brought up in citizen surveys and satisfaction surveys across the country. So we're not unlike other municipalities in that regard, and we're trying to bring forward some other types of long-range planning for how to address our streets moving forward. What is it going to take to maintain the current level of infrastructure? What's it going to take investment-wise to improve the network of roads? And what could occur if investment stopped? Just if something catastrophic happened and we couldn't pay for the resurfacing, then what does that mean long-term for our roads? So we're trying to get programs and processes out there that give us a better picture of how to spend our money and how to spend it wisely.
One of the things, of course, this is an individual opinion, probably get a lot of argument against that, but I always thought way back when they started covering up our brick streets was a sad thing. And I know that brick streets are a high maintenance problem, so that's probably the reason for that. Do you know, young man, that we used to have wooden blocks in the streets around the courthouse?
I've heard that, yes.
It's the truth.
Yeah. I don't think that the wood blocks would probably hold up to some 2-ton trucks and semis that drive through the community.
They didn't have the load bearing that we have now.
Right. And the thing about bricks is that, when bricks are installed, brick streets are pretty resilient. They hold up quite well. The problem is that they're labor intensive to put down. That's where the expense really is. I was visiting my brother-in-law in the Netherlands, and they were putting together a brick street in front of his house. And many of the streets...
painstakingly, I might add.
It was, and that was kind of where I was going with it. They took forever to install that brick street, and it was basically 3 guys hand-laying brick. It was fascinating to watch, but it was also kind of painstaking to watch because you were just hoping it would be done.
They go with the long haul. They like to keep the old stuff.
Yeah.
They don't throw a bunch of blacktop over. They'll get out there and put 2 or 3 guys on a block, and then they may be there the whole summer, but...
and they were, I believe.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
But, we're pretty blessed, the 3 of us. We live in an area where we have the brick streets, and I like them very much. Now, talking about money for streets, I asked you off air if the vote in November saying that they couldn't use gas tax money the way they use everything else. Just put it in the general fund and do whatever you like. They had to really use it for the purpose for which it was intended. I would think that would have freed up some money for you. That was I thought that was the purpose. Well, how's that working for you?
I don't think that we're going to see any type of windfall from the state of Illinois because of the referendum vote. Can you believe that? Isn't that something else? Yeah, that's a news flash brought to you here first.
Right.
No, I think that for years that fund had been swept for a number of different other purposes, and that includes, I think, EPA functions were being paid for out of that transportation fund money, and it was, one of the unintended consequences of that vote is that if you can't sweep it and put it elsewhere, then whatever's operating on that money is going to hurt. So it's not just, it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, I think.
Well, that's what we've done since time immemorial.
Sure.
And,
kick the can down the road.
Peter runs out of money finally.
Yes.
You just can't do that forever.
I think that the problems of the state are the biggest detriment to economic development in the state of Illinois and in local government in particular. And I won't say every, but when cities go for bond ratings for any type of debt that they issue, there's always some language in there about the state of Illinois. And the problems of the state of Illinois are reflecting on the capacity and the economics of the local governments. And that's just, we're somehow punished for being in the state of Illinois and trying to do things and trying to improve ourselves. But that little note is always in there. By the way, you're in Illinois, and we're going to take note of that.
I know, but that's why industry and individuals are leaving Illinois.
Yes.
Okay. Is our mayor, city council form of government mostly prominent throughout our state?
I would say yes. The manager form, manager administrator form is pretty common. Illinois is a very prevalent state with the city managers and city administrators. Other prevalent states are Wisconsin, North Carolina. There's a good number in Florida. Texas and California. So there's a lot of people in those associations. We have a professional association, and each state has their own. Those are very large associations of members. And
when you go to conventions or meetings of your fellow administrators and exchange ideas, that just inures to the benefit of the community here for you to go out and pick up ideas from other communities.
Absolutely.
But ours, of course, we have to bear in mind the size of ours, and so many. We're small potatoes now, but we still handle a lot of money in this area. Money aside, if you had one good thing as city administrator, what would you like best to have, Clay? That's a blindsided question.
That's a big question.
Just crawl up on Santa's lap here.
If I could have just one thing, I mean, that would just be the revenue to do all the things that we say we can do. And I'm not saying that we need to introduce new taxes or anything like that, but there's a lot of needs. And it's difficult for our staff and for our council to weigh those needs and have to decide between doing this project versus doing that project. I'd like to be able to say, yeah, we can do all the projects. Because
you have prioritized.
Yeah, and that's what we try to do.
Too. Yeah. Everybody has to do that.
Right. You look at your house. Sometimes you can't do your roof replacement because you need to get a new refrigerator and a new dishwasher, or you have medical bills that are just going to be more important than doing your roof. It's life, and we try to do the best we can.
Well, and you do. Our guest this morning has been Clay Johnson, our city administrator. We appreciate your taking your time. I know you're busy, bud, and so I know this takes a little time. You may have to do a little midnight oil to make up for this. We're talking about small communities, and I found a quote that somewhat facetious, but it applies to small communities. And this was made by none other than Truman Capote. And fame is only good for one thing. They'll cash your checks in small towns.
There you go.
Thank you, Clay Johnson,
Thank
for
you
being
all.
with us, sir.